LawBreakers is a fast-paced, high-mobility arena shooter, whereas Overwatch is a fast-paced, high-mobility arena shooter. In LawBreakers, each character has a Shift, E, and Q, being the ultimate ability, whereas in Overwatch, each character has a Shift, E, and Q ultimate ability. LawBreakers features a diverse cast of colorful characters with voice lines, in-game lore, and skins for each, whereas Overwatch features a diverse cast of colorful characters with voice lines, in-game lore, and skins for each one. LawBreakers costs $30 with free DLC for life, however there are some cosmetic microtransactions. Overwatch costs $10 more at $40, but the DLC, maps, characters, and modes are free, but there are some cosmetic microtransactions. When you open up loot boxes in LawBreakers, they're usually average, sometimes awful, and sometimes awesome. When you open up loot boxes in Overwatch, they're usually average, sometimes awful, and sometimes duplicates. LawBreakers has really cool cinematic trailers that get me hyped for the game, and Overwatch has really cool cinematic trailers that get me hyped up for the game.
When the Overwatch announcement trailer hit, and Matt Fishman looked at the trailer and he goes, "Oh, fuck."
Okay, you can kind of see where I'm going here, but the rest of this video isn't going to be such a direct or snarky comparison. From the outside looking in, these two games look very similar. Lots of people say that LawBreakers is ripping off Overwatch, or that it's Overwatch without the waifus, but if it's Overwatch without waifus, wouldn't that be Team Fortress 2, since Overwatch is just Team Fortress 2 with waifus? But anyway, while they may look the same, while the marketing materials overlap, and while there are some definite, very direct comparisons to be made, these games play very differently, and this is coming from a guy that utterly loves Overwatch and also really enjoys playing LawBreakers. The rest of this video is going to focus on just how different these games are, why they play different, why I bother playing both of them at the same time, and I'm going to be relying on developer interviews and developer clips to prove my point. One of them I would like to play in context again. That was Cliffy B.
The internet and gamers in general tend to do this technique that I refer to as pattern match dismissal. It's like, oh, so this is just that meets that, big deal, I don't care, oh, you're just a Overwatch ripoff. And it's like, well, we were working on everything we knew for this game before we even saw Overwatch. And I remember the story I like to tell was sitting at Raleigh Times with Matt Fishman and some of the other staff when the Overwatch announcement trailer hit, and Matt Fishman looked at the trailer and he goes, "Oh, fuck." And I'm like, no, this is good. We know now what not to do.
Overwatch is a grounded shooter. When you play Overwatch, you're walking around on the ground, your gravity is normal. There are a few characters that fly and quite a few that may have interesting movement abilities, but more or less gravity works right. You stay on the ground, you might bounce around a little bit, but it is a traditional shooter in that sense. However, LawBreakers heavily focuses on low-gravity zones and outdoor fights where everybody can essentially fly, and then some regular gravity indoor zones. Gravity control, both controlling the low or no-grav area choke points, objective control, and some of the objectives can change the gravity briefly, can make a huge difference in gameplay. LawBreakers is a 100% skill shot based game. There are no easy mode, non-aiming abilities that you get to use. Every single character and every single ability has to be aimed, timed, and executed properly. You don't get You don't get any hand-holding, you don't get any baby steps, you just jump right in and you are expected to perform. There are AoE abilities, and there are some limited lock-ons. However, almost all of the lock-ons require an initial skill shot, lock briefly, or have incredibly short range. My experience is that the hit scan abilities dominate low gravity because it's difficult to hit people that are flying around, whereas the projectiles and bouncier or more difficult to aim abilities dominate the regular gravity zones. But in both zones, you're expected to be carried by your skills, not necessarily your tactical knowledge or positioning. Whereas Overwatch has several no-skill heroes that are all about positioning and mental skills. Mercy's healing pool noodle is not a high-skill ability, and this is not an insult to Mercy mains out there. I love you and I want you to res me more often, but you can't say that this is super high-end, mechanically intensive gameplay. Mercy's all about knowing who to heal, when to heal, and where to position herself. There's also the case of Symmetra, who puts stationary turrets all over the map that microwave people. There's none of those such things in LawBreakers. and she has a lock-on microwave gun. Of note, I actually made a huge mistake in this gameplay, and McCree should have murdered me, but the no-skill gun kinda kicked in and saved my life. Winston's Tesla cannon, also not exactly super complicated. It just electrocutes anybody that's in front of you, and Winston's skill is knowing when to get in and when to get out. LawBreakers has none of that. All of your character's abilities are 100% skill-based.
So I think our movement, our gravity, our core shooter kind of gameplay, the way that I've pitched it and I've said it before, is where a shooter that happens to have all those, abilities and characters, they are the inverse of that. At the end of the day, like, we've tuned our shooting mechanics so much that I think people who've played like CSGO and Quake and those games will really appreciate the kind of love that goes into it, and hopefully give it a go.
And while we're on the topic of abilities, I would also like to mention that LawBreakers has no stun abilities. This is something that we talked about in the developer Q&A that I actually don't have on film here, but Cliffy and all of the other devs are somewhat disturbed by a trend in shooters to include abilities that are more frequently seen in MOBAs, such as stuns, roots, disables, and things like that, and they consider it to be especially jarring because they freeze you in place and prevent any action. A shooter is a fast-paced, energetic, like high-octane game. You're bouncing around, you're reacting, you're doing things, you're playing, you're counterplaying, and then bam, you're stunned, you're frozen. It's very, very annoying. So all modifiers in LawBreakers are designed to be soft disables. They're silencers that limit your abilities. They're slowdowns. They're cooldown modifiers. They're no insta stuns. Whereas in Overwatch, looking in from a different perspective now that I've heard this, actually has a lot of these very annoying moves. Roadhog's hooks can be incredibly annoying because they disable you, pull you in, and you just have to wait to die either by the pig himself or getting dogpiled by your enemies. McCree's flashbangs are probably the quintessential example of this because if you get hit by one, there's a loud pop, a bright flash, and you are instantly stunned and frozen in place momentarily. It jars your gameplay, it stops your inputs from doing anything, and you just have to watch yourself die and depend on your teammates to save you. Don't even get me started on Mei. Mei freezes and freezes and freezes, and she is about as pure cancer as cancer can get. And as a guy who really enjoys Overwatch, hearing this gave me a very different perspective on these sort of abilities, that it is very unusual for such a smooth, fluid kind of shooter to have these very jarring freezes. On abilities, again, the Q or ultimate ability in LawBreakers is much weaker compared to that of Overwatch. Almost all of the devs for this game secretly play Overwatch in their downtime, and one of the flaws they found with it is that the games, especially competitive ones, heavily revolve around ultimates. Who's got an ultimate? Who's got a shatter? Who's got a grab? Who's got a setup? We're going to do nano blade. We're going to do these kind of things. So they decided that for LawBreakers, their Q ability, which I believe they named their key ability or boss ability, boss key, I can't remember which one it was, don't shoot me, are much weaker and easier to play around. Some of them don't even charge. Some characters, such as Nash, the asshole robot, who's one of my personal favorites, love the personality there, is actually just a modifier of armor that he toggles on and off. So the ultimate abilities aren't nearly as ultimate, and they're much easier to play around. Speaking of which, it's much easier to play around almost all of the characters in LawBreakers because they were designed to have no hard counters. Overwatch has a few characters that are hard counters, where there's just almost nothing you can do, such as Winston versus Genji, or Mei versus Diva, or Diva versus Zarya. It kind of revolves like that. They're very hard counters. LawBreakers has none of that. It's designed to where you can outplay any character with any other character, even the medics and healers. That is, given sane positioning and, team support, but you're never at a true disadvantage. Your skills will always carry you to victory. At the end of the day, when you factor all of these things in together, and I think the 100% skill shot's probably the most important one, the two games really do play quite differently. LawBreakers feels like a spiritual successor to Quake and Unreal mixed in with a little bit of actual like Twitch shooting from more like Battlefield with the hipfire sort of thing, and Overwatch feels like a spiritual successor to Team Fortress 2. I hate saying that because I'm a big Overwatch fanboy, but it is very true in a design sense. A more obvious difference between these two games is that the art styles are very different. Overwatch is cartoony, it's kid-friendly, it's anime-ish, and I personally kind of enjoy this on occasion, but many people do not. So LawBreakers is designed to appeal to those. LawBreakers is adult, it's violent, it's irreverent, the characters curse, they're not nice people, there's jibs and blood and things like that. So it's definitely not the sort of Pixar game that a lot of people are used to. And let's be real here, this game is made by Boss Key, which is a brand new studio, and published by Nexon. Compared to a game made and designed by Blizzard and published by Activision, LawBreakers is a major underdog, like David versus Goliath, to be perfectly honest with you, and they're not unaware of that. Like, the goal with Nexon and Boss Key and LawBreakers isn't to take down Overwatch, rather...
They're the elephant in the room. You know, if they're Coke, if we could be Pepsi or RC Cola, I'm okay with that.
So I think these games do play very differently, and one is not a ripoff of another, even though there are some strong similarities. I think LawBreakers is going to appeal to a hardcore shooter crowd, and that's going to be the crowd that Overwatch largely missed. I think Overwatch is going to mostly appeal to casual players, and in droves probably, but they're certainly not the same games, and they're going to end up having very different player bases. And at the end of the day, I do think that LawBreakers is a good game with all of my playtime on it. The beta is opening up very soon, or depending on when you've watched this video, perhaps already open, so I have a buttload of beta keys down there below in the description, so if you click the show more on whatever mobile device or PC you're watching on, you can copy and paste one of those into Steam. They are first come, first serve, so those of you that are there on the notification squad, I hope you enjoyed the LawBreakers beta keys. Guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.